And good morning to everybody. This is Jeremiah, and we are going to have another of our fantastic webinars. I am very excited about this one. Um, I will remind everyone that, of course, we're probably going to get a lot of questions on this, and so you're welcome to type in questions into that little question box. And I'll be sure to get you some answers to that. And David has been gracious enough. He's going to share pretty much everything you're about to see. So you're going to have access to a lot of this really incredible source material, PDFs, and contact information, and this amazing SketchUp model as well. Um, I originally met David at Labash, and he's a recent UC Davis graduate there, and impressed me with his brilliance and his kindness. If you're lucky enough to meet this gentleman, he is an extremely friendly person. But yeah, you look at his website and just the just oozing art out of this person. But what's fascinating for this is someone who's passionate about skateboarding and has been a skateboarder his whole life, and now went and got the landscape architecture degree, and is just such a fantastic spokesperson for uh, skateboarding and skate parks. And I've always had a special fascination for skate parks, because my theory is it's the synthesis of athleticism, park, and art, and specifically concrete art, which to me is just a very fascinating medium. And so they're just a wonderful thing for communities. But he's going to say this much more eloquently than me, and with some actual facts behind it and everything. So and you got a great little collection of people from around the country here hinging on your every word, David. So I will hand this over to you.
All right, on. Can you hear me? Awesome. So I'm
Yeah, I
going to
can hear
start.
you absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to start with a little introduction about myself. As Jeremiah mentioned, I am a recent UC Davis graduate, and hopefully a skate park designer one day. But currently, I'm a landscape designer, an artist, and a friend is what I call myself. But I hope one day, like I said, to be the world's leading skate park designer. I've been building, designing, and making art, structures, solving puzzles since I was a little kid. I kind of want to go into a little background about myself real quick. Sorry. I played with Legos and erector sets and Kinects, any wood or metal scraps I could get a hold of. And at about the age of 12, I found out about skateboarding, and it gave me a reason to make things. And through skating, I learned more about friendships and struggles and overcoming fear more than anywhere else. I mean, than school or at home. And there's a lot of hard lessons in skateboarding and your development and training and practice and the patience and struggle it takes to really to push yourself beyond who you thought you were and what your limits might be. But today we're talking about skate parks in a sense of landscape architecture and design, their purpose, intent, qualities, importance, designs, do's and don'ts, possibly who to contact, and how to get one in hopefully every city worldwide. I want to apologize ahead of time if I do heavily advocate for the use of skate parks. I believe they serve a very large purpose, more than just for skateboarders' use. They do tell people that you can kind of come from nothing, and if you work really hard, something can come out of it. Say a city is, thriving to get a skate park, the community is really going to band together to get that going, and it's just a really wonderful thing to see sometimes. But I just kind of want to talk about skating for a little bit and how it embraces this complete freedom of movement and remains this totally alternative form of expression in an otherwise sometimes expressionless landscape. It strengthens its patrons by having them use both their mind and body in synchronicity to solve urban, suburban, natural, rural, and design puzzles, and the design puzzles are skate parks. So I'm going to give you a little brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to do a brief history of skateboarding, skate parks, and their terrain. Then I'm going to talk about design considerations, things to include, consider, and look at when designing a skate park. And part 3, I did 8 case studies for my senior thesis, and I will include 4 of the better ones that I did. I'm not going to say four of the better ones, maybe just four of the eight. And then we'll go into a skate park theory. What good are they? And I'll answer any questions. And I have a bunch of firms and foundations to give a list out to people who are interested in how to get one in their community. So let's just kind of start with the history of skating. I define skateboarding. This is a little long definition. It's also a personal one. So the act of riding, performing tricks, slides, grinds, and manipulating a skateboard on objects or flat ground while maintaining balance and movement with the skateboard. As you can see on the left here, this is a professional skateboarder, Silas Baxter Neal. He's totally reusing this landscape as, we'll just start by saying, this turning it into a wonderful piece of art almost, kind of like a street function. And then you can see the grace of Jeff Rowley on the right side pushing. And what is a skate park? A purposely built environment properly equipped for skateboarding, welcoming users to explore its objects freely. These are some of the parks I went to. Top left is Granite Skate Park. The middle, longer one is Fairfield, California. Top right is Benicia, California. Bottom right is Rancho Cordova, California. And so let's just kind of jump into a little history of skateboarding. So here I have the the kind of start of where I guess the roots of skateboarding. From the early use of transportation into sidewalk surfing, through the freestyle and vert ramp styles, and kind of continuing into the urban landscape and creation of facilities, skating has really shifted and fluctuated kind of like a river, carving out oxbows and anyways, you could see here with the three-wheeler, there were usually two of these in the 1920s, and they were kind of like slalom skiing. Kind of move into the 30s with a skeeter skate or scooter skate, the 40s with a skeeter skate, another 40s with these new trucks that were developed from railroad trucks, kind of apple crate scooters through the 70s. Those started in the 50s. And then you have your assembled skateboard, probably stole your younger sister's roller skates or your own roller skates and nailed them to a piece of 2x4. And then, in the later 50s, we started seeing clay wheels rather than metal or steel. And these wheels actually were compound walnut shells. Then we kind of move into the 60s where we use those clay wheels and more fiberglass boards and carved boards that were, becoming this good form that was shifting to the times. And in the 60s, 70s, there was also a development of polyurethane wheels and precision bearings. I'm not going to get too far into that, but I would like to explain a little bit about the culture. So in Santa Monica, the Z-Boys came from Dogtown, which was Venice Beach, Santa Monica Pier, and they kind of resembled surfers. At first, they were surfers. Then they moved into skating as a side thing. Skating as lost time for the waves. As the bearings and boards kind of got better and the wheels became better, skating separated itself with these advances in technology from surfing. Nearly in the mid 70s, the Z-Boys became a very popular group of sponsored skaters and kind of dominated these competitions that were being put on promoting skateboarding. And then in the early 80s, the Bones Brigade was established by former Z-Boy Stacy Peralta. This included people like Tony Hawk, Rodney Mullen, Steve Caballero, Lance Mountain, and they really started to define what skateboarding was. And at the bottom right here, you can see we have a totally new board from the 90s until now. It's kind of remained the same. And let's jump into skate parks and their terrain real quick. Again, I just wanted to say it's a purposely built environment properly equipped for skateboarding, welcoming users to explore its objects freely. That is also my definition. And with skateboarding and the terrain, we kind of saw a movement from the waves to the concrete and asphalt. But there was a movement towards, objects like full pipes that people would find, maybe in Los Angeles they were set aside in the deserty areas. Empty swimming pools, they were used in the droughts in the late 60s and 70s in Southern California when the water would be drained and such. They would the guys would ride around on cars and kind of look over fences to see where they could get into the pools. Embankments and swales, anything that was smooth, people would skateboard on. But we started to see a development of skate parks early in the 70s with parks like Carlsbad, Upland, Marina del Rey, Del Mar Skate Ranch, and these insurance costs were getting really high for the private property owners because cities hadn't yet invested in skate parks, so they started to be demolished, which kind of moved skateboarders into this weird phase of freestyle where they would skate on flat ground or they would build ramps in their backyards. And this kind of moved skateboarders to the streets in a little backwards way. And as people started moving towards the streets, cities started to recognize it as a almost delinquent act, and they would knob, as you can see in the bottom right corner here, they would knob ledges, they would carve out little gaps, they would make cracks bigger, maybe add aggregate to something, sandblast ledges, and put knobs on handrails. So as a response to this, skateboarders kind of banded together. Specifically in Portland, Oregon, Mark Hubbard and Mark Scott got together. They are both CEOs at two separate skate park firms now, Grindline in Seattle, Washington, and Dreamland in Lincoln City, respectively. And they built this kind of do-it-yourself park, or a DIY, inspiring people in San Diego to kind of band together and do the same thing in the early 90s. And cities recognized this as at first they saw it as another act of delinquency, and then they realized that it was actually very helpful. So in the 90s we saw this huge impulse for cities to start building these 90s skate parks, which I like to call them. It's a weird phase where they didn't know what they were doing, and that's kind of why I'm here. So in 2006 we saw this type of park on the bottom left, the DC Skate Plaza in Ohio, Kettering, Ohio to be specific. And this was built by the Rob Dyrdek Foundation. And we saw this movement after that of kind of these really prestigious, clean slate, just wonderfully aesthetic parks that almost resemble a plaza or an urban center. And as you can see, they're just these great places. And I'm going to kind of define what types of parks we'll see. Street plazas is the top left. I thought it would be better to put in a SketchUp model. These are more resembling urban design plazas. Bowls, pools, transitions. These are kind of areas of skate parks where you're just going to see a lot of embankments and swales and curves, not a lot of linear activity. And then the modular above ground, these I don't recommend. I'll get into it a little later, do's and don'ts. These are typically wood, metal, skate light, acrylic. We'll get into that. And then we have our skate spots, which are just simply, maybe they're a neighborhood installment, maybe there's a few of them scattered throughout an area. And then we kind of have our flow parks, which are, they have a direction. You're kind of almost told where to go and come back and do it again. And then you have your hybrid parks, which are typically a mix of everything. So you have your transitions, you have your bowls, you have your street areas. And it's just, the way it is. So let's get into some design considerations. I'm going to open up my SketchUp model here. I apologize ahead of time if it lags a little bit. If you just want to read through these real quick, they're kind of the pieces I'm going to be going over. Let's see. So I reorganized this so I can just jump right into it. So this is my senior thesis, was this whole large area here. It's a large parklet with the skate park in the center. But for a second, I'd like to focus, sorry about the zoom. I'm going to let this catch up in SketchUp. Okay, so I wanted to bring up, the do's and don'ts. So these are cracks and expansion joints. These are often forgotten by the contractors or maybe the people who built the park rather than the people who designed it. Here we have this ledge in the top left, and as you can see, by putting a crack near the front of it, that might deter skateboarders from using it frequently. Their wheels can kind of hit it, and you can get stuck in it after maybe it's a quarter inch, but after a while, right in front, it's going to expand and start cracking, and it can deter people from using it, obviously. When they get on top of the ledge, I've outlined all these no-nos in red. You don't want to really put cracks in the center or towards the end of a ledge, being that it visually it might deter a skateboarder or distract them from the trick they're trying to conquer or do. The wheels can get stuck. It makes noise. it gets bigger over time, basically. And in the landing area, maybe say here, you kind of want to put these larger cracks at a skate park towards the middle of the object on the ground. So possibly here, if you can see this hand. And then maybe with ramps like this, you really don't want to put the cracks on the ramp. If you can make something smooth in a transition like this, by having these cracks, they're just, again, they're going to get bigger over time. Um, so say expansion, and then wheels get stuck in them. They're deterring for the eyes. Skateboarding is very visual, and when you're riding towards something, say like this stair set, it's gonna distract you, and you're gonna say, oh, my wheels are gonna click on this, and I'm not gonna pop at the right time, or and then when you land and you're in this kind of area, these cracks are going to expand and break over time. I've seen it at the Rancho Cordova skate park. There's a crack right at the end of the 5 stair they have there, and it's about 2 inches now, and the concrete is actually chipping, making it also dangerous. Um, and say you have a rail, again, like the ledge, like the ramps, you don't want to put a crack right in front of the beginning of it or the end of it. Possibly towards the middle would probably be the better alternative choice. Um, and again, this is a embankment. You kind of just like a slope. Here I've got an example of the top of an embankment. I've noticed that at parks, they're a little more successful with having a cornered angle as such on the right side here. This left one, when you round an angle like that, it's visually distracting and disorienting. When you're popping your skateboard, the front wheels might roll over the top here rather than having a like designated focal point where there's that exact corner you can kind of dictate where your board might pop. It's not so bad on the ledge, but on this embankment here, it's a little disorienting and possibly distracting. And then I kind of want to get into fences. I'm a big advocate for having no fences. I came up with an alternative during my thesis, which is a smaller fence. I'll get into that in 1 second. But as you can see here on the left side, if you have, per se, a ledge, and people want to skate that ledge, and while they're on it, there's a fence next to it, there's a possibility for injury. And that can be maybe your arm gets stuck in the fence, maybe the fence is too short and it's spiky at the top, or it could potentially injure a skateboarder or any user on it. And I also believe that fences kind of it almost makes a skate park like a little prison, and you're kind of stuck inside of it, deterring users from coming in, and it gives the city a little bit of dictatorship over when the skate park can be used and when it can't. Sorry about that. So I've come up with an alternative, which is a small, maybe concrete fence. And basically it's just, 2.5 feet, 3 feet tall, keeping dogs out of the park, little kids out of a skate park, and it stops boards from shooting out of the park if someone slips. And in some cases, you might even be able to use it as a secondary object for skateboarding. Maybe you could put, a granite ledge on top of it, or steel coping. And getting into steel coping kind of on ledges, I've set an example here of using even flat coping, which is kind of sunk in with the ledge, versus round coping, which kind of gives it this, where maybe the wheels, let me start over here. So you want this flat ledge. You want to be able to not be, you want this to be flush. That's the word I'm looking for. You want the coping to be flush with the ledge rather than an annoyance when you're on top of it, and you kind of have to bounce off of this. If you're a skateboarder and you're riding on it, you kind of hit that edge, and it can move your board in a way that you're not intending to manipulate it. And this is more of a preference or a personal issue. I've noticed it at a lot of the better parks, that they use the square coping, and a round coping on ledges, it's just a little disorienting for some skateboarders. I'd say always go with the flat coping if possible, and not countersink it, make it flush with the ledge. Oh, sorry about that. I'm trying to rotate here evenly. I hope this isn't too disorienting. And I I like the idea of having different levels of skateboarding. And I don't mean physical levels. I mean, you have your pro skateboarders and your beginners. And I think it's important that at any skate park, if you have the space or money, that it's important to include areas for both, yeah, the beginners and the pros, and possibly, anyone that any level of skateboarding. And by adding an object that is small and gives someone the chance to learn on, they can progress and start eventually to skate the larger objects. And as a pro or amateur skateboarder, you don't want to deter them from using the smaller objects. So you can manipulate them and kind of move them together as a mesh. Maybe this whole object here is skatable from up here, but only someone who'd been skating a long time could notice that. Um, a pro might jump from here to this rail, rather when someone from the new might be here and just skate the smaller rail. And that goes the same with any ledges or rails on the flat ground. You kind of want to have, yeah, both pro and amateur and or all three. Let's say that. And the reason these parks are designed, I did them in a very dark color tone, was the idea that sun can almost be like it can be blinding sometimes, and concrete can act as a large reflector like the snow, blinding people or kind of almost burning them. So having a darker tone to any skate park, or just darker colors in general, helps with the reflection of the sun. And let's see, moving on to steep rails and ledges. We see this a lot in the 90s parks where they didn't exactly know the precise angle or length of a rail or ledge. I'm using a stair set here because I can clearly define that this is a very steep rail here. This is a very steep ledge. An issue is that a skateboarder might be going really slow just to go onto the top of this rail. It's a matter of physics. If you're going super fast, you're going to end up at the bottom of the rail. Whereas on a taller rail, let me rotate here, you kind of want the top and the bottom to be at even level. Say this were at 36 inches, you'd want this to be at 36 inches as well, giving it an even grade down the set of stairs, or maybe it's down a ledge like so. And that just gives a better alternative to learning any tricks, and almost like a real-world staircase. You can make these shorter on both. Maybe it's only a foot tall here. Just keep it at a appropriate grade change all the way down. Jumping over to steepness of embankments, I see this a lot at some parks that were rushed or were short on space. They sometimes will include these really steep embankments on and in the corners of skate parks where maybe someone needs to start moving towards an object or up an object. It's better just to keep this medium grade rather than have it too short or too steep. I don't have the precise angle, but as you can see visually, it just works better to have the shorter angle or the moderate angle. And these are some objects I've designed personally. I like to take objects from the real world and kind of push them into what maybe I would see them as per skateboarding. So I call this one the bookshelf on the left here, and I've just turned it into a bunch of swales, making this ledge on the outside skatable. Maybe it's only 2 feet tall, maybe, so you can jump into it and skate through it. I call this one the coffin. It was Dracula inspired, a little Bela Lugosi. And it's just, a play on the pyramidal shape with a ledge going down the center. And then let's move over to the audio tape. Becoming fascinated with music, I love audio tapes. Zeppelin 2 is my favorite. Here we have, just a few ledges manipulated and kind of pushing and pulling in SketchUp. And one of Jeremiah's favorite, my robot nipple is what I call it. So it's basically another pyramidal shape, and then on the top you have a smaller condensed one, giving skateboarders the ability to do possibly wall rides or skate over it or on top of it. And then, I got the right angle. I didn't actually fill this out all the way, so I call this one the beanstalk. And basically it's just a leveled, a quarter pipe with embankments with some leveled ledges on the outside. And I just want, anything and everything is skatable. So skateboarders will always find a way to kind of manipulate the environment and push push through if not given the opportunity to skate park. Um, so this is I call this the David M. Williamson Skate Plaza. Uh, this is the urban or rural or suburban park that I've designed. Let me get into my other notes here. So uh, basically, I did my senior thesis and took all of the attributes and better parts of the skate parks I had visited and included them in my park. Um, and I think some of the things I got to were runway and space. These are really important aspects at a skate park. You always want to have the right amount of space and runway and landing for any object. As you can see here sorry, I'm rotating so much. I know this lags a little bit. Uh, Here you can see I've left enough space, and the runway I would include in this little swale or embankment here, uh, as I got this from the St. Helena skate park. So you can use this to gain a little bit of speed lost on the the length of the flatland here, giving you enough space and not compromising the stair set's use. Um, Having too much of one thing at any skate park is just it's not good. You want to offer variety. Having too many stairs, ledges, rails, quarter pipes, or whatever object can get kind of repetitive, especially if they're the same thing. It's nice to have multiple objects in different areas and sizes and shapes, because the same of anything can get boring, and you want to really visually stimulate any skateboarder at a park. Space and visibility. Sorry, I'm zooming out again. Um, at any park, you want to have a lot of visibility, which may um, compromise what you can put towards the center of the park, especially if it's an area where there's really no direction to my park. I did that intentionally. I think that having an open park with space and visibility is important. If you're a parent and you want to see your kid anywhere in the park, if you're a tall guy and you're standing in the center, you want to see the short people on the other side of an object, or maybe you're trying to do a line, and a line is a series of movements on a skateboard through a park. And you want to move through the park without running into anybody. So include the space and visibility. Yeah, don't add too many obstacles. The flow and direction of park. Don't let the objects dictate how someone should skate the park. Flow and movement around a park are important, but having a simple direction, it just doesn't work. It implies favor to either a regular skateboarder or a goofy skateboarder. Those are stances. So um, uh, if you compromise the park by adding one type of direction, you're inevitably excluding some skaters from skating a specific object. And then I just want to touch on a theory that I have about round versus square rails. Some people prefer round rails, some people prefer square rails. It's really up to the community to dictate what type of rail or ledge they would like at a park. As stated earlier, I prefer square, flat, flush ledges. Some people might prefer the round coping. Again, that's a preference, but I just included it because it's a topic of much argument with skateboarders. And I also think it's very important to include lots of flat space. Here I've kind of put it in the corner over in this area with the red curb. People just beginning to skate like to learn new tricks. You like to play games of skate, which are almost like horse. And it's just, it's relevant to have the small open space. Maybe you just want to lay down on the cold concrete on a hot day or something. I don't know. It's just having the flat space gives people the opportunity to learn new tricks. And speaking of sun and hot days, you have to really consider, as a landscape designer, it's really important to consider where the sun is at all times on any project. So rising in the east and setting in the west side, I've kind of manipulated my park so that this bridge here runs south to north or north to south. And over the day, it varies with the shade and the sun moving the shading of the bridge, maybe from the left side of the park to the right side, giving skateboarders on a hot day just a wonderful amount of shade. And I want to jump into accessibility and location of the park. I know sometimes a city has a planned area where they're going to put their park. It's primarily on the outside of town, which I see happen all too often. Happening here in Napa, California. We're moving our skate park out to the Kennedy Park, which is way south Napa. I digress, sorry. So having a skate park with a good location is important, and multiple modes of transportation to and from that skate park would be ideal. Maybe a public transit system such as a bus or a train. Having bike racks is important for people trying to ride their bike there. And availability is also very important at a skate park. Say you're an adult and you work all day and you want to skate at night, but there's nowhere to skate at night in your town. So you have your city skate park with your night lights. Hey, what a savior. Or it's a really hot city. Say you're in Tennessee and it's humid and it's not the best to skate in the day. So at nighttime you can come and feel free, and be at this great park with the stadium lighting. And I just want to remind everybody, size at a skate park isn't really a limit. I designed my park at 15,500 square feet. Considering that the 8 case studies I did, I rounded the average of those being 15,500 square feet. But I've seen parks at, a skate spot, and it can be just 100 by 100 feet. Maybe it's just a 20 by 20 foot square slab of concrete on the ground, and it has one rail, and that's perfect. Because again, that states that the city shows they care a little bit about the skateboarding population. Um, and I just want to consider a few things to always add to a skate park. Some of the parks did case studies on were missing a lot of these. Restrooms, everybody needs restrooms. Drinking fountains, they're very important for hydration and emergencies too. And a lot of seating outside of the park. As you can see here, sorry again on the lagging, a simple bench will do. And you don't want to deter skateboarders too much from using them, but by adding, a simple style like this, putting it in the grass, they're not going to get used by a skateboarder. Maybe, they'll just sit on them like anyone else. Uh, and, bike racks are important. You need trash cans, possibly recycling if you're ahead of the game. And in my park, I thought this was pretty ingenious, was if you have a skate park and it's set on the outskirts of town where there's no accessibility to food, we can bring in food trucks because, again, these are up and rising kind of alternative method to food. Um, and by locating them at a skate park, I don't see why that wouldn't work. And like I said, transportation to the park is important. So maybe we have the guys in the food trucks skateboarding. Who knows? Um, and I think it's important to have. I know that everybody has a cell phone, but sometimes maybe a cell phone dies and a kid gets hurt at the skate park, or there's a robbery and someone needs. So an emergency phone here, and maybe a charging station. And those are just kind of some little critiques about skate parks. So you want to have the restrooms and the benches and such. But on a landscape architecture note, having shade is really important. Barbecue pits, places for people, obviously. Um, and you always want to have planting and vegetation. In my Photoshop rendering of this project, I've included a lot of trees, um, but I left them out of the SketchUp model for lagging purposes. It's just, a green area can show that it's a nice place to be. Don't put in shrubs that are going to attract bees. And grass promotes sitting and picnicking. And I've added solar panels to the top of the parking structure here and to the top of the restrooms, possibly powering the stadium lighting at night. I'm going to zoom out here and show you the rest of this park. So I've got, a simple dog park, volleyball courts, bocce ball, horseshoes, basketball, playgrounds for kids. Well, the things you're typically going to see at any park. Um, and with the focal point being the skate park. But what I really like about this model is I've added some water cisterns to the bottom of the bowls and the areas where there may be possible deeper swales. And these water cisterns could collect water year-round and possibly be used as an alternative form of watering the grass or the shrubs or the trees that you might add in. So I'm just going to zoom out here. These are in the top right. You can see some models I didn't use in my park, but if you have access to SketchUp, you're welcome to use any of these. I'm going to jump back into the presentation real quick. And, oh, shoot. Let's see. Sorry about that, guys. Boom. Okay, so some design considerations. I just kind of went over these. No modular parks. Concrete's always better. Modular parks are the metal, wood, or skate light. They break, they chip, they get hot. They require a lot of fixing. Number two, skate park accessibility and location, very important. Availability, open day and night. It's crucial to have a park that can be skated almost anytime. And again, size isn't important. You want to include shade, restrooms, um, drinking fountain, sorry, plural. And you want to have seating outside of any skate park for the parents or for someone who doesn't want to be in the park and maybe wants to watch or spectate. Include bike racks. Make sure there's food nearby. Transportation to and from the park is important. You don't want your kids skating across the highway to get to the park. Have emergency phones. And if anything, it would be interesting to see every skate park have kind of its city's background in it. There's no guideline or perfect skate park. You're not just going to be able to have a precast whole skate park and put it down. So as a designer, it's important to maybe have a background of the city included. I saw that in one park I'm going to show. There's a Dallas skate park in Texas, and they've included a huge star, and that just immediately tells me, hey, that's Texas, and it has this stamp that shows its city has invested in this park. And do remember, everything is skatable. So I want to jump back into my case studies. I did 8 of them, primarily in Central California, being that I went to UC Davis, and these were the ones that were accessible to me and I'm pretty familiar with, including St. Helena, Napa, Vallejo, Fairfield, Rancho Cordova, Davis, Benicia, and Berkeley. Um, and I went to each one of these parks and I did a lot of research on them. I found out, um, you know, who kind of was the spokesperson for getting the park together, their year constructed, their size, their cost, average cost of maintenance, if helmets and pads were required or enforced, fencing, lights. I documented people present on visit, parking, signage, restrooms, drinking fountains, user ratings, if they had security cameras, possibly other uses. And I found the distance from the town center and popular objects skated. I had, every time I'd go, I brought 11.5 by 17 sheets of paper with me with the plan view of the skate park in it, which was always awesome to see the kids say, oh, that's our skate park and what it looks like from the sky. um, and I'd have them circle objects they liked. I'd have them draw lines where they would do their lines, and I transcribed it later, which I'll show you after we go briefly over the skate parks themselves. Um, and I would also bring with me a series of formulated questionnaires that um, for community members and for skateboarders, and I had them fill those out, and I also transcribed those. If you'd like to see more of that information, it's included in my thesis on my website, or I can have Jeremiah send it to you. But this is Fairfield, California. My favorite skate park. I think the skateboarders have really taken over here and kind of um, made it a place it's almost like a little haven for skateboarders. Uh, and it was brought by the Rotary Club in Fairfield. The park is covered in graffiti, and it's always been like that. There used to be a fence around, but some BMX riders took it down. And it just shows that as much as the city cared to build it, the skateboarders cared to make it their own. And there's plenty of flat ground. There's great objects. As you can see here in the bottom left, that garbage can is missing its can. And in the top right, we've manipulated it and moved it over to be a skatable object. In my park, I have movable barrels to avoid such maybe vandalism is what the city might call it. There's restrooms. There's plenty of parking, as you can see. And it's just in an open area with other sports activities like baseball. This is the Napa Park. It was built early in the 90s. It's a mix between concrete and modular ramps. It's probably I love the park, but I also hate it. It was built on a sewage plant, and the top right, you can see the corner of the sewage plant. That's what we call our restroom. There's no water fountain, no working water fountain. We've had a broken water fountain for about 8 years now. And right now, that bowl in the bottom right is filling with water. It's almost overflowing. There's huge signs around it. My theory is that they just took a tube and put it into the dirt and said it was going to drain fine. Um, and they put these modular ramps in the bottom left corner. That's our second set of them. They just added a huge concrete square to the end of the park and put the ramps in. thinking that was a good solution to making our park better, and I don't understand why that was. Again, that's our second set. The other one's broke. And the city told us those cost $15,000, which is just absurd waste of money to me. So here in the bottom middle, that is my rail. I had my stepfather help me kind of get it together. I've had it since I was a kid. He made it safe by city standards, and I went there one night and I kind of gorillaed it in, and I used a concrete drill to have it put in place. And to my surprise, the city came back the next day after watching me put it in on a security camera, and they reinforced it. And that just showed me that in some way the city did care a little bit. And I want to move over to Rancho Cordova. This is one of the best parks I've ever skated. It's near Sacramento, just a little east of Sacramento. Um, and it's just such a good park. They have everything. The grass is green. There's no fence. The only critique I have about it is that you can't skate it at night. There's very dim lighting, and the mosquitoes can get a bit hasty during the hotter seasons or humid. You can see in the top left in the back there's kind of a designated wasteland or wetland for birds and such. uh, every object at this park is nearly perfect. There's shade, there's water fountains, there's playgrounds for the kids. This whole park in general is just a great example of what any park could be. Although it is kind of set on the outskirts of the city. Vallejo. Now I put this park in for two reasons. One, they have a terrible fence that I can speak for. I almost have broken my thumb on this one a couple times. And the park is modular, meaning that there are these metal ramps, as you can see in the bottom middle. That's a very small crack, but that is all over the park. Sometimes the metal, the bolts and nuts get loose and they just fly around the park and you can hit them, and it's just so dangerous. Um, the plastic chips away. And then they have this beautiful bowl in the back. In the bottom left, you can see that. And they've put a fence between the skate park and the bowl, which I don't even understand why that's a thing. But there's restrooms. There's a water fountain. There's a dog park. It's a really cool place, other than the fence and possibly the modular ramps. I wish they would have invested in some concrete. Moving on. I have my 8 reflection mappings here. These are what I was talking about with the 11 by 17 sheets of paper. These are the maps that I would bring to the park and have kids circle the objects they like. I could list these parks real quick. So in the top left, that's Benicia. In the top middle, that's Berkeley. Top right is Davis. Middle left is Fairfield. The middle is Napa. The middle right is Rancho Cordova. The bottom left is St. Helena, and the bottom right is Vallejo. And when we take away the mapping, you can see this really pretty transcribed into Adobe Illustrator trademark. These are their user reflection mappings is what I like to call them. And I use them to kind of dictate the shape of my park. Again, the top left, we have everything kind of meshed together. I know it's a little hard to see. So the top left is Napa. These are the 4 ones I showed earlier. The top right is Fairfield, the bottom left is Vallejo, and the bottom right is Rancho Cordova. And moving on, these are all 8 combined. I think it's a wonderful little drawing. I was going to use it in an art show I had on Saturday. And I used it to kind of dictate the final design and layout of my park. Again, my park is 15,500 square feet, and I used these to kind of map it out. In SketchUp I did this. This is in plan view. And in which case you can see the objects I've laid out are kind of in matter of importance and moving around with the park. And here's a little final perspective of my park. A wonderful place to be. I hope it's like my dreamland. I'd put a bed there if I could, if it was real. So here's just some examples of parks that I haven't necessarily been able to skate, but I've found them very intriguing by the videos I've seen at them, the gossip I've heard about them. St. Cloud, Minnesota. This is a mixture of California skate parks and Action Sports Design. They're 2 very prestigious firms. And you can see the movement of the new type of skate parks. There's rocks here. That's just and the color of the concrete. It's so cool. And here in Corning, California, this is built by Dreamland Skate Parks. Just I can't get over the fact that this place exists, and it's not just for walking through. There's people use this for skateboarding. Um, and here in Houston, again, oh shoot, I said Dallas earlier. I meant Houston, Texas. The big star in the center. This is totally um, like a designer's like, hey, we're building this in Dallas. Let's get a star in here, or Texas, Houston, Texas. um, and here in Florida, on the bottom left, that place, it's just like a little. It's such a pretty little landscape. You have these really cool urban plaza elements, handrails, benches, and it's totally skatable. As you can see, there's a little restroom in the bottom left corner. And in Provo, Utah, this is built by Spawn Ranch. Oh, the last one, Florida Team Pain, that's the designers. Um, Here in Utah, there's this little park, and you can see the development and infrastructure has become stronger, wielding this quarter pipe that has no backing. And that gives room for more sustainable features like stones or maybe like um, a indigenous grass or trees. Um, and then this one on the bottom right, I just wish I could live there. Look at that view. Like if you were at that park and you weren't even skating, you'd have an appreciation for what was surrounding it. I hope it's not too far from city center so that people can get there and just and bathe in its glory. The only critique I have is that the concrete could have been a little darker. If there's sun at this spot, it might get a little bright. But I just love to lay in the grass and listen to skating there. That'd be great. And so I'm just going to go into a little brief theory on skate parks. I think that every skate park really, really adds to the community. It shows that the city not only cares about the youth, which are I've found to be the primary users, but they have invested in us. And I call myself youth. I'm only 27, but I'm like 15 at heart. Um, so yeah, any community, it's so beneficial towards any community. It shows that kids don't have to. I'm not against team sports, but it shows that you can be a totally individual person as a skateboarder and go and skate at this awesome skate park you're getting. And skate parks are a great outlet for kids and adults, and it really brings them together. I have friends. Sometimes I'll go shopping, and I'll see like a 12-year-old, and they're with their parents, and the kid is just like, "Oh my gosh, David, hey!" And they're like, "How do you know that adult?" And it keeps me young, knowing all these kids and kind of watching them grow up. I mean, I've been at the Napa Skate Park since I was 12, so I've been skating there for almost 15 years, and every other park, and I've really watched the kids grow up. It's really cool to see who they become. And that introduces this idea of camaraderie. These kids will always be my friends, and vice versa. It introduces skateboarders to one another, unlike a social network where you have your screen in front of you and you're talking and talking and blah blah blah, and more maybe you meet people at school. But a skate park is somewhere where you can come together with people that are very like-minded. Maybe they ride on like a BMX bike or a scooter or rollerblades or whatever they do. There's this sense of like, hey, we have this area and we have a common meeting ground. And I just have to say that skateboarding is a very universal language. I don't speak any Japanese, but I know that if I went to Japan and I met a skater, we would get along, he or she, and we would be able to talk skateboarding and we could show each other with examples of tricks and such. And skateboarding really it teaches tolerance and patience. They're lessons that I think are really important to kind of growing up out of that childish phase of wanting now immediate. You really have to earn any trick in skateboarding, and it's on you. And for an act of tourism, a good skate park will bring skateboarders from all around. And in some cases, skate park can deter inappropriate behavior, as in Burnside. When that park was built, the city noticed in Oregon. Burnside is in Portland. The inappropriate behavior that was going on there before was deterred by the addition of the skate park. and that was, that's a great little movement. And skateboarders, I don't like to say that they're in a controlled environment, but I do like to say that it's more safe for a skateboarder at a skate park, being that there's no cars driving around in a skate park. There's no traffic signals. There's no pedestrians, hopefully, that you're going to run into. Um, and it's, skate parks are a little safer. I also advocate for giving the option of wearing a helmet. I don't think enforcing one is appropriate. Um, it's a very good privilege to ride a skateboard, but I don't think it's appropriate to say that we need wear a helmet. And again, skate parks can offer a really good place to learn and grow. You feel very appreciated. You can progress, and it just gives a good place to interact with other skateboarders and maybe reflect on your day. You had a busy day, and you just who wants to go sit in front of TV when you can go kickflip a 10 stair? That'd be really cool. Um, and they provide other uses aesthetically for people who might want some inspiration, can go to a skate park and see an object they've never seen before and draw it out, and maybe they make a new bookshelf out of something that was a quarter pipe or a handrail. um, and for any landscape architect, seeing a skate park is a great way of seeing a place that was properly designed for people, and aesthetically and intent, the quality of the design, the quality of the build. It's so inspiring sometimes just to see a skate park knowing that in the future they will remain, whereas a building may crumble. um, and here's just some development resources I'd like to get across. So number one, if you're thinking about designing a skate park and you've never skated, I would heavily, heavily, heavily advocate that you always hire a skate park designer or build specialist. I've seen many flops of a skate park because someone thought they could do it and it wasn't appropriate. So always contact a designer or builder. Maybe you designed it and they can build it, or again, vice versa. Never let a modular company that is wood, metal, or skate kind of sell you on a completely metal or wood skate park. There are places where this does work. Indoor parks are a good example, where there's a high maintenance value, or camps that celebrate skateboarding by the summer. They have these great wooden parks, but those are a different story. For any city that's building a park, you want longevity, which is concrete or granite, and if possible, recycled concrete. Um, and every city or town can afford and deserves a skate park. I think banding your community together to get that working is just the greatest thing. I've seen it here in Napa. The meetings were just very inspirational. Kids would come and play with clay, drawing, and just kind of getting their definite input on the skate park. And again, it takes a oh, sorry, about the afford. Any city can really use fundraising. There's plenty of foundations out there, which I'm going to give you a list of. And the last note, it takes a skateboarder to design a skate park. And it also takes a skateboarder to stop a skateboard object from being kind of built. It takes a skater to stop a skater. So if at a landscape architecture firm, maybe you're designing this awesome bench and you see, oh, it's perfect. No homeless people are going to sleep on it. Like, it deters bird poop, or it's slanted just at the right angle for ergonomic use. And then some skater comes along and just ruins the edge because that was so unaware in the mindset of designing it. And in which case, I think every landscape architecture firm should go to their local skate park and find a skateboarder to come and ask if an object will be skated. Or not. Here is, I just wanted to give a really kind of short list of firms and foundations that I have found. And I will share this with you. These are all the numbers and locations worldwide, basically here in North America, though, including Canada. But oh, hey, look, there's mine. And I'm just going to kind of open it up now for questions. And I would be glad to share my model or any other information with you. So, Jeremiah, take it away. Sorry, that was a little longer than I remember. Yeah.
Oh, I think we're perfect, and yeah, we got a good handful of questions. I'm sure more are going to come
Cool.
in. The first one was if you have any kind of comment on graffiti, the basically uh, you know, um, preventing, encouraging, dealing
Oh,
with.
well, actually, in my park, so I've noticed that at a few skate parks I've been to, there's the city considers graffiti a problem with, and most of the time, let me just state that when we think of graffiti, it's normally in spray paint, or in other forms of maybe vandalism. But I don't think graffiti is vandalism if you can dictate where it could be used. At my park, I've designed this whole little quadrant here, giving graffiti artists a place to kind of do their art. Um, and I don't want to heavily advocate for graffiti. I think that having it in some terms is good. It's another outlet. I know a lot of graffiti artists have turned into even better artists because they were willing to risk their uh, willing to risk what they had to offer. I don't really know how to put that into better terms. But I've seen graffiti in almost every park, and a lot of times they'll cover it up. Sometimes it can be a hassle if you're a skater. It can get slippery on maybe some area of the park where you want more grip with your wheels matching the concrete. Um, I'd say if you're worried about graffiti, you know, do an area. I know that at Venice Beach they have a whole graffiti wall, and what happens is, some artists will put it up and they'll do a really nice thing, and then another artist will come and they'll say, oh, I don't want to cover that, but I'll add mine to it, and they'll do it at another little area. Um, I as for graffiti, I think it has its place, but I can't say that there's any direct method to deterring it. Cities will probably always see it as an act of vandalism, but I think that at a skate park you can kind of dictate where it could be placed or used, or kind of giving a tip of the hat to graffiti artists. At my park, they can use any part of the outside wall they'd like. I hope that helps. Um,
Oh, absolutely. We got another question on well, two things at once.
yeah.
But on safety zones and also on in terms of design, incorporating like you mentioned, BMX and scooters.
Oh yeah.
Um, if you have any comments on both of those.
Yeah. Okay. So as far as incorporating safety zones, I'm not sure exactly what is meant by that. Maybe it's the uh, lower levels of skating for the possible beginner, and that's where it's important to include the flat space or smaller objects. It's not that pros or amateurs or someone who's been at a skate park a long time aren't going to use the smaller things, but I think if they see there's a lot of respect at skate parks for the new people beginning. Age isn't really an issue. So if you're 45 and you're just picking up a skateboard, maybe you'd be more inclined to skate over in this area where it's a little more flat, and the objects are smaller, or in this one as well. If you're a little kid, maybe you're 5 years old and your parent wants you to start skateboarding, I would in that case I would encourage helmets and protective gear, and also that you keep a close eye on them. Is for their skateboard, if they per se they were in this area and their skateboard slipped, I put this red curb here and this curve here to stop boards from flying into the bowl. But as for safety at a park, any little smaller area is probably the better area to be. And I know a lot of skate parks don't have that. So in which case, let's get more of them. And then for scooters and BMX and rollerblades, I see a lot of parks try and dictate when it can be used. I know the Benicia Park in California here, near Vallejo, they have designated hours for BMX riders and then for skateboarders. I'll say that doesn't work right away, because you're not if it's a sunny day and it's been raining all week, and during the hours of 2 to 5 only BMX is allowed, there's going to be skateboarders in there and there's going to be scooters. Um, and in which case, I think that that's more of a mindset for the people using it. There's got to be a good method for right of way. I am okay as a more advanced skater. I know and can predict patterns that maybe a little kid is going to use or a rollerblader's movements. And it takes kind of an eye to get used to that. But the better way to think about it is scooters, rollerblades, skateboards, and bikes all use things differently. So a designated skate park may yield itself to bikers, or BMX riders, but the issue there is the ledges. If they're made out of granite, they're going to chip a lot easier with the pegs of a bike than with the trucks of a skateboard. Um, and on a rail, pegs and scooters are going to dent it more than a skateboard might. Um, but as for movement, visibility, flow, it's really up to the people to determine how to move around a park. I think, again, most skate parks should be open to BMX or rollerblading or skateboarding or riding a scooter. They're all, I don't want to say the same. They're very similar in the idea that uh, they they are frowned upon outside of a skate park, which is a whole nother issue. But it's really up to the people using the park to kind of kind of see how that's going to work out. But I can't promise that any park is going to allow bikers. I can't speak for every skate park and its community. Um, there's solutions out there. I'm sure there's a few parks that have found a way to incorporate all without hurting any. So
Exactly. We need a designer of each to collaborate, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. They'd be like the Power Rangers of skateboarding. Like, yeah.
And so now Joy here has a handful of questions, and I can
Okay.
tell that she's definitely designed skate parks. So get ready
Awesome.
to be
Okay.
grilled here.
Okay.
Um, but
I'll do my best.
particularly, she has mentioned you kind of talked more about where not to put expansion joints, and
Okay.
that's always a
Yeah,
trick where to put them, but then
yeah,
also
yeah.
drainage, size of drainage, and then she's in cold weather, so drainage is very important, and then things get chipped, and then how do you repair them, and do you have examples of repair? And so, really, like, definitely spot on with these questions. So I'll let you.
Yeah, I can try my best to answer all of those. Hi, Joy. Okay, so first off with expansion joints, um, I think I can't really explain exactly where to put them, but as a skateboarder, I know not to put them right in front of an object, not to put them on top of any object, as much as you can. And it might do best to. I know I talked about pre-casting. Maybe if you had, I'm going to zoom in on something like this. If you don't want to put cracks right here, that's just, I don't know, right on the center line. I wish I could point with my finger. Um, but maybe a possible crack right at the beginning where no board's going to hit if that's important to this durability or longevity of the object. But placing expansion joints on the top of um, any object like this is really going to affect the way it's skated, especially if it goes over to the corner and you're going to have to fill that in with possibly like stucco or such. Um, but yeah, as far as expansion joints and cracks, I just I just don't think they belong right at the edge of the top of a stair set or right at the bottom. Move them back or like as close to the tip as you can, just so that they don't deter someone from using them or uh, get bigger and crack and such. But yeah, as far as expansion joints and the cracks go, just leave them away from the beginning or end of any object. Put them, as far back as you can, so that there's a proper foot placement on the skateboard. Setting up, sorry, let me go into something real quick. So setting up on a skateboard, right before the object, it's important to have your feet exactly where you want them. And sometimes that expansion joint can vibrate. You go over it so quick that it'll vibrate your feet and maybe move them, or it'll make you fall off your board because you have a weird foot placement. Um, so again, just right before and after an object isn't the most appropriate place, and it depends on the park, possibly the grading of the park, as to where you're going to put those. I think maybe adding more rebar to heavy impact zones or prior to the object might decrease the amount of expansion joints you have to add, or the thickness of the concrete can probably dictate that as well. Getting into the embankment swales and drainage techniques, I think it's important to hide those, and maybe put them in areas like, say you had this object here, like this, maybe right in the middle here would be an appropriate area for a drainage. It's going to bank off of this ledge and roll into there without affecting it in rainy weather. Um, or in areas where it's a little more flat, you can kind of say I had this, and this was maybe there was small swales on the left or right side of it. A rail drainage, um, uh, sorry, a drain might fit underneath this rail where it's not going to affect any skateboarder. And I've noticed a lot at skate parks I visited during my case studies that they put, actually, I can probably pull some of those up. They put drainage ditches on the right on the edge of the skate park on the outside, where the concrete may meet another alternative ground form, say dirt or soil or grass or a shrubby area, and that kind of hides the drain in general. But I would like to, let's see, I'll pull up this real quick, sorry. You get to see how my organization tactics work. Um, let's see, I know that in Rancho Cordova, I used some of the drainage that they had wasn't appropriate, and you can see it in the concrete. So here what they've done is they put you can almost see where the pipe goes underneath because it cracks right here. But you can see that they put the drainage on the outside and put the swales kind of towards that. But here, this is really interesting because this is the concrete. And although there is a swale in the concrete, you can see that the water has kind of formed and carved out its own method. And if that is if that's appropriate and you know that that's coming, maybe you make the concrete thicker there and don't use the same tactics you would other places, I guess. Let me see, what am I trying to say here? If you know that's coming, maybe put it in an area where it's going to be more flat ground skating, or it goes underneath an object that won't be used possibly as much in the middle. Maybe like this runs through the middle of a rail, almost like an expansion joint or crack. Or maybe you design a little swale like this, and you could skate over it. My idea is going crazy right now. My mind is like, how can I fix this? Maybe you design a little swale, and it becomes a skatable object with water flowing through it. That would be great. Let's see. Nothing else here on those. Yeah, here's some more cracks. They put this right outside of the skate park. Isn't that sad? They put skate stopping techniques in here, and they made these cracks in the ground bigger too. And okay, so I covered the as much as I could the drainage and the Okay. What was the last? What was Joe's last question?
I think you got those questions. She then also has one more follow-up, which is great, which is also just on the actual concrete material, on the smoothness versus the grippiness, even if porous concrete is acceptable in places to help control the drainage.
Sure. I mean, anything that's permeable would be great. I'd say in high impact zones, don't put the permeable or porous material. Maybe like prior to it, you could. Maybe you can even make objects hollow to use less concrete. It's important that skate parks are very smooth. That helps with impact and control almost of your skateboard. If you land perfect on a really smooth surface, your momentum isn't going to be disrupted. With my park, I did this very smooth concrete surface, and I know that skateboarders are deterred from riding on any aggregate surface, so I built this bridge here kind of as an example. On the left side is for skateboard access, on the right side is for maybe bikes or people walking their dogs. But yeah, like the type of material you'd use to build any park is important. The more smooth, the better, I can say. Yeah, that's basically it. If you have an area maybe underneath every object, you put this lighter material or a heavier material. It's kind of important to know the location of it too. Is it in the sun all day? Is there heavy rainfall? Um, is it gonna be used again? Like maybe it's open to bikers and rollerbladers and skateboarders. Is it gonna be uh, you know it just the way that it's used is really important to the type of concrete or granite you would use. Um,
Excellent.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Maybe you use a porous concrete, and on the top of every ledge you use granite. I don't. Maybe you have $1 million billion.
And
Yeah.
then, so I think that pretty much wraps this up. I got one more question for you
Okay.
from myself. I thought it'd be
Yeah.
I hope it's a good question.
Okay.
Is
No, there's no.
just
There, remember, there's no such thing as a bad question.
as but also I want to remind everyone that David has offered to share all of this even this amazing SketchUp model, the list of all that information, and even the PowerPoint and everything. All that will be available for download when we post this to the website. But about this amazing SketchUp model that you've created, your quote unquote
Yeah.
dream
All right.
skate park. Um,
My
I,
dreamland. I mean, my kid could
right?
go. One day when I have a kid, they can go to this park. Yeah.
And I just noticed it looks so radically different from any skate park I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you.
And to me, it's eclectic is the word that comes to mind with me. And
Hmm.
so if you could just the bowl, I just see so much of skate parks want to take just the bowl shape everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you could just last question here is why is that eclecticness so important to you, and why is that so much better than staying to some single consistent design throughout the entire park?
Well, basically having an eclectic mix of materials. Yeah, I say materials too. It's important. You want to include maybe granite, steel, concrete, grass, and yeah, my park is a little different from most because I used all the parks for my case studies. I only used objects that people had liked or told me they would like to see at their skate park. And I went up and I designed them. And sometimes I would show the kids, hey, what do you think of this? Like, and I would get a lot of input on my park. Oh, you should put this here. That would look really cool. And I did it. It's really, um, it's a park that I would like to skate to. Everything here is accessible to all levels of skateboarding, and it's just so mind blowing. Each little thing here is just like it's totally designed with intent. So even down to the little red curb, uh, you have your red curb, you have your China banks from San Francisco, you have your huge bowl, which is most people like that. And as you get older, sometimes it's easier on the knees and the back. You have your mini ramp with the little spine transfers and maybe an embankment here, and again a drain where it's not necessarily going to be in anyone's way or disruptive. And you have these movable barrels. Basically, I've just tried to manipulate what I've been told was a good park and what I've found to be a good park, and kind of mesh it all together. Um, and again, with the eclecticness of it, it's not only a skate park, but my this place is just like a huge center. It's the only thing that's missing is buildings. And I showed this to Jeremiah last time. Um, Let me turn these on real quick, and it'll just. My idea was that these skate park they don't have to be set outside of town. Possibly, what if we just saw a park like this? Maybe like it's a central park and it's set aside, and we have these huge buildings and residential, and wow. So I'm gonna take those away now. uh, I, this is my
Yeah, I think also, I mean,
imagination
that
at
also
the.
seems to me to be that addresses the whole issue. Yeah, yeah, that whole issue of graffiti or bad behavior association with skate parks is putting it more in a town,
Yeah,
more
I
eyes on
agree.
it. It takes
Um,
away that negative association.
and then speaking of that, I have this study here on noise in skate parks. And I just wanted to say that real quick. Putting a skate park in the middle of a neighborhood isn't a bad idea. I mean, putting a fence around it, yeah, that's a bad idea. But putting a park next to someone's house is totally cool. I think that kid that grows up there is going to be a pro skateboarder and be the best. But who am I to say? And I'll send this report to everybody too. Um, I just wanted to get into this real quick. So the noise levels at a skate park are way lower. They're almost like in an ambient level, like a vacuum. If your neighbor was running a vacuum, you'd hear that. And speaking of statistics, this is a sorry to get into all this, Jeremiah. I just wanted to show it real quick. So this is a head injuries per um, like quota. So yeah, every 1,000 participants, out of cyclists, football players, and basketball players, skateboarders have the lowest amount of injuries and head injuries. I don't want to say that's because skateboarders are not being watched, and maybe when they break their arm, they don't know they broke their arm. But I'm not going to say that. But this is a 2010 study. It's just a screenshot from part of my thesis. I have the data too. And then this was another study you guys can check out. It was by one of my committee members. His name is Kevin Fang. He is a PhD candidate at UC Davis for transportation, and he did this whole project on skateboarding and longboarding, as fun, speed, exercise, cost, coolness. And it's just a great report, and I talked with him a lot. Hey, and if you do get all these PDFs, they will include my highlights. um, yeah, so skate parks are awesome. That'll be my final words.
Fantastic. I like that. That's a growth.
Yeah.
We'll end it with that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. This is really great. And I'm sure there'll be some follow-ups with this, and maybe we'll have a more in-depth one later. And just reminding everyone, we will have David's contact information and all this stuff available for download. So do feel free to, uh, uh, you know, contact him, of course, but also to take note of when we send out next Monday's newsletter with all that information. And otherwise, have a great weekend and great holidays. David, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I just wanted to say, anyone who I'm a very not intimidating person. If you would like to contact me, feel free. I love to talk. If you felt I was wrong at any point, I'd love to hear a counter argument or possibly maybe some critiques. I'm starting out. I'm very young. I want to say I've never, built a park. I've only played Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and designed them, and then SketchUp and the real world hit, and I found out that I could do this for real. So it's what I want to do. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.
Sounds great. Thanks so
Okay,
much.
awesome.
I'll talk to you later.
All right, thank you so much, Jeremiah.
You bet. Bye, everybody.
Bye.